Well, guys, if you've been watching the Daily Mail over the last couple days, you've seen that Alice Evans had a really bad day in court yesterday, and then for some reason decided it would be a good idea to try to make me part of the story, since I was there in the courtroom. So I wanted to make this little video for you just to bring you up to speed on what has happened. Obviously, as you can see, I am not in my normal studio. I'm in Los Angeles. It's about 1 billion degrees here, so I'm sitting outside in the shade. As a result, it might be a little bit noisy. There was a chainsaw going earlier that hopefully will not come back. And we might occasionally get a cat or something coming through, but I did want to share with you this amazing bottle cap skull creation that is my backdrop for today. I'm just blessed to have amazing creative people around me, and I get to enjoy the fruits of their work. So, the reason why we were in court yesterday was because Alice filed a motion for temporary spousal and child support from her ex-husband, Ioan Griffith. If you are new to this case, I would just encourage you to go back and watch my previous videos that I've made about this. It has been a very extended divorce. It's in year number 4 now, highly contested. I'm sure the parties have their different versions about why that is. But nevertheless, up until this point, there hasn't been a formal order in place for support and maintenance. Now, Ioan's forensic accountant has filed some documentation that indicates that he has already overpaid her by about $400,000. And previous to this as well, there was a stipulation in place for Ioan to pay Alice $10,000 per month as an advance against spousal support and child support obligations. This was really understood to be it was meant to get her on her feet, help her get herself in a position where she could live within her means and become a little bit more self-sustaining. So the parties did have a premarital agreement, which up until this point was understood was going to govern the decision as to maintenance. You can't do a premarital agreement for child support, only for spousal support. Nevertheless, that is essentially what had been relied on to do these kinds of calculations of what is owed. But now recently, in the course of this litigation, Alice has also reneged on her previous stipulation that the premarital agreement is valid, and now apparently she wants to challenge it. So that was kind of the general background for why we were there. I'll give you a brief overview of the motions themselves. So Alice claimed in her motion that she needs the interim support because Ioan has left her destitute. In fact, she is in such serious financial straits that she will need to apply for food stamps and welfare. Wow. But curiously, at the same time, she also filed a sworn financial declaration in which she claimed that she requires just under $16,000 per month in her living expenses. She claimed that she is unemployed and that her monthly income is somewhere in the ballpark of like $20 a month, which is likely attributable to residuals on past work that she has done. Ioan responded to this with some rather interesting evidence because he has had a forensic accountant reviewing her accounts over the last several weeks. Now, Alice has not fully disclosed all of her financial information according to Ioan, so the accounting is basically the best that can be done with the information that is available. But it does include a review of her bank statements. And so in that review, the accountant discovered that contrary to her declaration as to her lack of income, she has in fact received several large unaccounted for deposits into her account. And when I say large, I'm talking in the ballpark of tens of thousands of dollars. And so these assets have not been declared. The source has not been explained. This tends to be a little bit of a no-no in court when you're going in on financial matters. He also found some very intriguing evidence, because this is not the first time that Alice has claimed poverty. Back in 2022, she actually started a GoFundMe, and in that announcement, she claimed that her accounts were now at zero. She was out of money, she couldn't afford lawyers, couldn't afford to buy food for her children, all of that type of thing. Well, the forensic accountant who had her bank statements discovered that at the time she made those statements, Alice in fact had over $80,000 in the bank. So there seems to be some evidence of some fairly significant financial fraud that is being uncovered through the financial investigation. In Alice's reply, she simply claimed that these were misunderstood and misinterpreted, but didn't explain, of course, what the reality of the situation is, according to her, or, suggest exactly which facts were wrong as far as the bank balances, the deposits, and so forth. So that was pretty much the context coming into the hearing yesterday. Now, an important piece of the background that I'm going to fill you in on, because it will become important if you aren't familiar with the case, is that Ioan and his new fiancée, Bianca Wallace, they have a domestic violence restraining order against Alice. A judge issued the order back in 2022 based on a pattern of prolonged and ongoing harassment and abuse that she was perpetrating both in private and largely on her social media. She also did a number of interviews with other media outlets. There's a famous interview she did on Lorraine where she cried and how bad it is to be left in the lurch and that type of thing. So she has, to an outsider's perspective, really made it her mission to punish him for leaving her and to smear him publicly in a way that appears to be quite damaging to his reputation. So this request for support was for guideline amounts. California, like many states, has kind of a standard calculation that's used based on the party's income, the number of children, expenses, things along those lines. It's a bit strange to me to contemplate how you can even enter or ask for an order for guideline support when you haven't disclosed the information that relates to you to be able to perform that calculation. But nevertheless, that is the situation that we are in. So that brings us up to the hearing yesterday. So I have been following this case for years now. It caught my attention back during the DVRO proceeding because one of the allegations that Ioan had made, by the way, if nothing else, the DVRO application is worth reading because it contains 70-some pages of documentation of her abusive messaging and so forth. But one of the things she had threatened him with was that she would do to him what Amber Heard did to Johnny Depp. Naturally, that got my attention. So I've been following this case for several years. I have been on my way down to Southern California over the last week and a half or so. I've been on a nice road trip. So I decided I was going to go to this hearing. I got there very early in the morning because I've never been to Stanley Moss Courthouse before. I don't know, every court has different processes for getting through security and parking and all that stuff. So I didn't know what I was going to find. Turned it out to be pretty remarkably easy. So I got there, I took a little photo of myself outside because I had not announced that I was going to be going to this for reasons that will probably become abundantly clear as this story goes on. In short, I did not think it would be a good idea to alert Alice to the fact that I was going to be present in the courtroom. So I did that. It was probably, a little bit before 8 in the morning. The hearing is scheduled to start at 8:30. And so that would alert the people who were following me that I was going to be, documenting these proceedings and reporting on them. So I was about the first person in the hallway outside the courtroom, waiting for the courtroom to open for the cases to be called. Alice and her attorney arrived also fairly early, quite a bit after me, but before the hallway was really all that full. Alice came and sat right next to me on the bench. Now, I don't know if she didn't see me. I don't know if she didn't recognize me. Maybe she just, I don't know. I don't know. But either way, she was sitting literally like inches away from me on the bench, sitting there on her phone, on her Twitter. I really don't think she did know that it was me, because she does know who I am. She has, tried to slag me off on her Instagram before, since I have been, alert to what is really going on in this situation, and have called her out for the campaign that she has waged here, her extremely bad behavior. So eventually the court is opened. It's late, of course. Ioan arrives with his two attorneys quite a bit after Alice and her attorney. And I noticed right away Bianca was not there. And so that suggested to me immediately, okay, this is not going to be an evidentiary hearing. This is not going to be a situation where witnesses are sworn, called to testify, evidence is taken, or anything like that. It's just going to be argument based on what has already been filed in those court pleadings, which, by the way, you can find in the Tattle archive. They are doing a fantastic job of maintaining a public record of the litigation in this case. All cases, of course, of this nature are public record. They are open. Anybody can attend the hearings, barring some specific justified reason for closing it. It is a right under the First Amendment that the public has. California, however, charges a massive amount of money to be able to get access to their files, so it can be quite expensive to follow a court case in the state of California in their courts. So Tattle, in my opinion, is doing quite a public service by maintaining this archive so that the information about the case can be more publicly available to counter the narrative that Alice is trying to put out there. So we get into the courtroom, and I go to the very back row, to the back corner. I know I'm not part of the process. I'm not going to need to get up, go to the counsel table or anything like that. So I just want to be out of the way. Other people that have to get up, should sit close to the aisle, that type of thing. So I'm in the back row, probably 2 seats from the wall. In the row in front of me is Ioan and his team, and they are sitting over by the aisle. So Ioan is probably, 3 seats to my right. Alice and her team are on the other side of the courtroom, again, about a row up. So configuration-wise, if you drew a line, it would go like straight between me, Ioan, and Alice. Like, I could not see Alice directly. Alice could not see me directly. Ioan's in the way. You'd have to move to be able to get a line of sight. But so I would, just kind of casually peek and see what she's doing, and she's largely, sitting there on her phone. So the court gets called, and the case, the clerk basically advises the parties that the judge wants to see the attorneys back in chambers. So he calls them back for a chambers conference. This is just the attorneys, not the parties. So they all go back, and this conference, it goes on for quite an extended length of time. Like, if I'm guessing, I'm going to say 30, 45 minutes. You can't hear, what's being said or what's happening, but you could at times hear that voices were getting loud. There was some spirited argument happening back in that back room. So don't know, obviously, exactly what was going on with that, but for whatever reason, they had this preliminary discussion that was back there in private with the judge. Now, after the attorneys got called back, I'm just sitting there waiting, minding my business. At one point, Ioan, he turns and he looks at me, he sees me. And so I smiled at him. I think I nodded or winked or, something to just acknowledge him and that, obviously I know who he is. And that's it. Like, that was my interaction. And so I'm just get back on my phone, I'm doing my live tweet thing, and out of the corner of my eye then I see Alice shoot up and come walking over to our row, to our side of the courtroom, probably again 1 or 2 rows up from Ioan, one more row up from me. And she points the camera directly at me and is taking pictures. Now, I've seen how the Daily Mail has reported this, and that's now been picked up by quite a few other outlets. I can't say that Ioan Griffith wasn't in the frame. I don't know. He's fairly close to me, and from where she was oriented, it certainly seems possible. But it was quite clear to me that she was pointing the camera at me. I was the one that she wanted to document there in the courtroom. And I saw just before this happened, she had put up on her Instagram my tweet when I had announced that I was going to be there at court. She called me a mega troll and a crazy stalker, all that type of thing, because I dare to be a member of the public to appear and report on the facts of what happens in the case and not simply parrot the Alice Evans narrative of what transpired. So clearly to me, she was trying to take the picture of me in the courtroom. Well, photography in the courtroom is very strictly prohibited. It's very clear. They got signs up, it's there in the rules, like everybody knows it. I am clearly following that rule. And the bailiff sees this and is not having it. Oh my goodness. So he jumps up and he tells Alice, "You're going to delete this." And she starts to put up some kind of, weak protest. And he says, "I'm not asking you, I'm telling you." He then takes her outside into the hall. Boy, does she look, she looks nervous now going out there. Well, I'm thinking to myself, does he need anything from me? Like, I know what was happening here, obviously saw what was happening. So I decide to go out and, just be available if he needs my assistance. So I see them standing out there. I approach. The bailiff is like, hold up, wait. And I said, I'm just wanted to make sure that she had taken a photograph of me. And he says, yes, I have watched her delete them. And he confirmed that they were deleted from both of the files, the photos and the recently deleted and whatever. And so, okay, and went back into the courtroom. Now, of course, during this process, Alice Evans, like most bullies, is just an enormous coward. Can't even look at me. won't even look me in the eye. She's only hard online, and certainly had absolutely nothing to say to me when she had the opportunity to do so to my face. Well, okay, I went back into the courtroom and waited, and eventually the bailiff came back in. Alice was allowed back in, and the bailiff then asked to speak to me for a moment. So I went outside with him. He tells me that Alice has, he confirms that she had taken the photo. He had required that she deleted the photo, and he tells me she said that you were photographing her as well. And he's kind of smirking while he says this, like it's very clear he's not buying this. And I'm like, yeah, I'd be happy to show you my phone. He's like, no, that won't be necessary. But he says, while you're sitting in the courtroom, if it wouldn't be too big of a deal, it would be good if you would, refrain from using your phone. That way you can avoid any false accusations. And I said, yep, I get it, no problem. Well, if you've watched my channel before, I'm notorious for my my yellow legal pad note-taking, and which I was very well prepared to do yesterday as well. So I just went ahead and switched over to that. I took yellow legal pad notes until I could get out into the courtroom and update on Twitter at that point in time. So we continue to sit, wait for this conference to be over. At one point, Alice is, she's still got her phone out. She's still fiddling away with her phone. And at one point, I can see she's sitting there with like it turned, you know, like the screen, like it, she's got the screen at her and the lens turned in my direction, like very unnatural, you know. So the bailiff is looking at her, the bailiff is looking at me. He's side-eyeing her this entire time. I make eye contact with the bailiff and I kind of nod at him and I kind of nod at her, and he sees what she's doing, so he goes and takes her out into the hallway a second time. And I mean, yeah, I don't know if that solved the problem or what exactly, but she seemed pretty content to not mess too much with her phone after that. So eventually this chambers conference is over and everybody goes out into the hall. So obviously there's, you know, they're talking to their client, something is going on, I don't know what it is. So I go out into the hall just to kind of see what is happening. And I see, yes, the attorneys are talking to the clients, they're conferring with each other. So it looks pretty clear that the judge has told them, you know, go out and try to work something out, or like work out whatever you can work out, or just, you know, whatever, that type of instruction. So the attorneys are going back and forth between each other and having conversations and stuff like that. And this also then goes on for quite an extended length of time. Well, eventually I see Ioan's attorney and Alice's attorney go back into the courtroom and announce that they have an agreement. So I went ahead and skedaddled myself into the courtroom to see if they were going to put that agreement on the record, which eventually they did. And so the result of the hearing was that they agreed Alice would receive guideline interim child support of $3,000 a month and interim spousal support of $1,500 per month. So a total of $4,500 a month in support. This would be pending the evidentiary hearing that they did schedule. It will be held on February 13th of 2025. Quite a ways down the road, which is, you know, not ideal, but unfortunately fairly typical, I think, for these California courts that are very, very congested. He gave Alice a Gavron warning. This was also part of the agreement between the parties. A Gavron warning is in California. It's based on an appellate decision that essentially says it's the policy of the state of California that all parties to a divorce must make reasonable efforts to become self-supporting within a reasonable length of time, and that failure to do so can result in spousal support being reduced or denied. What is a reasonable amount of time varies depending on what the circumstances are. In a short-term marriage, it is 1/2 of the length of the marriage. This, however, is not a short-term marriage. In California, a short-term marriage is 10 years. They were married for approximately 14. So that rule will not necessarily apply. It then just becomes a question of the totality of the circumstances and the judgment discretion of the judge as to what is reasonable. So Alice was sworn in for this Gavron warning. She seemed quite nervous to take the oath. She was fiddling with her, you know, her clothing, her wristwatch. Took the oath. It was a little bit, I thought, strange to swear her in because normally, you know, when you're swearing somebody in, it's because they have something to say. They're going to be offering something factual to the court to rely on. And this is simply receiving a warning. The only thing that she, you know, specifically said, as far as I recall, is just acknowledging that, yes, she heard and understood the warning. But nevertheless, she was sworn in for that. So that was a little bit of extra formality for that process. There were some kind of collateral issues as well that dealt with an agreement on the custody issues in the divorce that was previously reached back in May, but had not yet been filed because there was a dispute about portions to be sealed. Specifically, Alice wanted certain portions to be sealed, which Ioan also did, but he wanted additional stuff sealed as well, which Alice did not agree with. So they reached an agreement to seal just the two versions that the two provisions that Alice wanted sealed. And that stipulation was filed. The judge signed it in court, and so that should be filed, if it's not already, probably sometime today. There was some discussion about kind of the logistics of accomplishing that. In part, the judge had written on his copy, there's a redacted copy and an unredacted copy, and then there was a signature page that the guardian ad litem had only signed, I think, the unredacted but not the redacted, and just it was all a little bit of a mess. So they were going to have to submit additional paperwork before the filing could be finalized. So that is probably taking place today and will show up sometime on the court docket, if not today, then tomorrow. So the custody at least is resolved, but well, as much as anything is ever resolved in this case, because now we know we can't necessarily rely on the stipulations of the parties. But then the evidentiary hearing, as I mentioned, was set for February the 13th. Now, there's more that needs to be decided to finalize a divorce than just custody and maintenance. When it comes to finances, there are also issues of division of property. There need to be decisions made about what property is community property, what property is separate property, how does it get allocated between the parties, and so forth. So it appears that all of those now are going to be decided at the February 13th hearing. So ultimately, my kind of takeaway from the case, it was one of those decisions that nobody really got everything they wanted. Nobody walked out like thrilled, feeling like they won. Alice certainly got significantly less than she was claiming that she needed, less than she was receiving before, and according to her financial statement, this isn't even going to pay her rent. She lives in a townhouse in Beverly Hills and is now likely going to have to downgrade her lifestyle or step up herself to provide some means of trying to pay for it. I am, however, looking forward to this evidentiary hearing because of just what we already have seen about some of the financial shenanigans that have been going on with respect to her earnings. One of the things that is kind of out there that is not real clear is that Alice has been promoting herself all over her own social media, that she's been doing these conventions for the Vampire Diaries, which apparently is a TV show that she was on for a short period of time. I didn't watch it, so sorry, I don't know anything about it, can't tell you anything about that. But she's done at least 2 of these conventions, which typically would pay you something, yet she hasn't declared any of that. So it looks like that's likely to be the direction that she tries to go to support herself, if that is in fact going to be feasible, and if in fact she does make such efforts. And then as far as the community property and the separate property, I mean, once again, my expectation is that anything that can be disputed will be disputed, because that's simply been par for the course in this case. The premarital agreement that was valid until, very recently now, Alice has said she is going to contest it, might give you a little bit of insight into some of the reasons why this divorce has lingered on for as long as it has. So from her perspective, this was not a particularly good outcome. From Ioan's perspective, I imagine he is probably not real thrilled to be paying her spousal support at all, given that it's, as I've said, according to his forensic accountant, he's already overpaid her about $400,000. And his own financial situation from his declarations is not good. Because of her smear campaign, he hasn't been able to get anywhere near the quality and the volume of work that he used to get. And so his income has significantly reduced. I imagine he is not particularly pleased to be paying any of that to her when she's already, if the judge accepts their calculation, she's already going to owe him more than she can, probably ever pay back, and probably ever would pay back, because if somebody decides they don't want to pay you back on something, what is your recourse? You pay a lawyer a bunch of money to go and try to get it. It can often cost you a lot more to go through the collection process than it can to just, walk away and call it a wash. So it's I imagine, that strikes him as quite unfair and an unfortunate situation, particularly in light of what is becoming appear to be some pretty egregious financial improprieties in her declarations and her record keeping and so forth. So ultimately, nobody walked out of court with everything that they wanted. Sometimes that's by design. They will say sometimes about a mediation, and it's a good outcome when everybody walks away unhappy, which is such a terrible perspective. But at the same time, the idea is that they don't want it to be about winning and losing. And so some judges have that attitude as well. I clearly got that impression from this judge. He was on the bench at one point when I was waiting for them to put their agreement on the record. He was handling another case, a Zoom case, and was making comments during that hearing that he doesn't want to get into the finger pointing. He doesn't, want to get into the good guy, bad guy stuff. He doesn't want to do forensics. He just wants to try to solve problems. And I think that's a very common perspective, which is understandable in some respects, but at the same time can also be quite frustrating in situations, in my opinion, like these, where it's quite clear that there is, in fact, a good guy and a bad guy. Somebody is clearly the primary problem here. And so when the court just isn't willing to step up and address that, that is a very, very frustrating place to be. It leaves a person feeling like there is not a lot of justice or accountability in the legal system. Unfortunately, in the family system, I think that is all too often the case. So that was pretty much the summary of the day. I think the last thing I just want to add is that Ioan Griffith, he is one of the most stunningly handsome men in person, just extremely good looking, even by the standards of, the land of the beautiful people down here. But you could really see the weight of this process on him. It was a fairly long day. It's not an exhausting day in the sense of like you're just sitting there on a bench, you're talking, it doesn't seem on its face like it's that tiring, but it was several hours. It was just before noon when the whole hearing wrapped up. So everybody had been in court for close to, little over 3 hours. And you could just see his exhaustion, how tired he was with this whole process, and my heart really did go out to him for how hard it must be to just not have that finality. Like all you want is to get free of this marriage and move on with your life. And it just gets dragged out and dragged out and dragged out, and I could really see the weight of that on him, and I felt quite bad for him having to go through that. Alice, as she demonstrated in court yesterday, is a lot harder for me to have sympathy for because she is the architect of her own misfortune. It's been her own bad decisions that have damaged not just her, of course, not just Ioan, not just Bianca, but their children, their whole financial situation. It's her lack of reasonableness and willingness to move on that has led them to the point where they have essentially spent down their entire marital estate on legal fees. And that's what happens. in a high conflict divorce. If somebody won't settle, if somebody won't be reasonable, if you have to litigate everything, then you have to pay a lawyer to do that, and that gets extremely expensive. And that's also part of the reason why it's so difficult to get real accountability in these types of situations, because you have to pay to do that. For all the reasons I just mentioned, the courts don't typically decide by themselves, oh, I'm going to like get involved and find somebody in contempt or something like that. Like, no, you have to pretty much do something in court to the judge to piss off the judge to get them to do something like that on their own accord. So the burden is always on the parties to bring the misbehavior of the other side to the court and get a ruling on it. That costs money, and it costs time. It conflicts with your main priority, which is just focus on getting this thing done. Get me out of here. Get this resolved. You just end up going down these collateral rabbit holes that end up delaying the case, end up costing more money, and just don't necessarily get you any closer to the end goal. So ultimately, a very, very frustrating situation for everybody involved. That said, there is a light now at the end of the tunnel. Possibly February, we will have some kind of final resolution. That's if we don't get, Alice firing her, sixth lawyer now or something like that, or, some other shenanigans to try to get out of the day of reckoning, so to speak. I am entertaining the possibility that we might see some more proceedings relating to Alice's deposition. This will just be a brief aside because she had been scheduled to have her deposition taken about a month or so ago, and had objected. She wanted a protective order to basically not have certain questions to be asked. She really didn't want Ioan asking about her extremely friendly relationship with tabloid editor Alison Bischoff there at the Daily Mail. Wonder why that would be. She seemed so open and enthusiastic about that close friendship on her social media not all that long ago. Well, that relationship is quite relevant to her actions in basically trying to ruin Ioan's career and impacting his earning capacity, his earning potential, and that bears directly on whether she should be sanctioned for some of that behavior. So her initial request for the protective order that had been denied, but nevertheless, she still apparently did not show for her deposition. So will there be consequences for that? Well, it would require him to file for contempt and to litigate it, and then you would get a hearing months down the road. And then is that going to interfere with the timing of the evidentiary hearing? This is why you don't get accountability in these processes. So it's possible there may be more disputes about the deposition. They may just renote it and go forward, but if she's continuing to complain about what can be asked, they may have no choice but to get it in front of the judge. So that's going to remain to be seen. But in the meantime, light at the end of the tunnel, possibly, maybe. If you've been watching this case with us for a while, then you probably know not to get your hopes up too high. Something always manages to come up to throw a wrench in the works when it's just on the verge of being resolved. But anyway, guys, that's my account of Alice's no good, very bad day in court yesterday. And how I ended up in the Daily Mail, apparently as a mega troll now. So welcome to all of you who came and found my channel, thanks to Alice and the Daily Mail's promotion of my work on her case. As you can see, I cover quite a few different legal matters. Hers, as I said, caught my attention because of the threat that she would do to Ioan Griffith what Amber Heard did to Johnny Depp. So do go back and look at my previous videos if you're interested and haven't done that already. I will continue to follow this case and let you know how things continue to develop. Thanks, guys, and I will see you soon.